Hello lovely friends, Camilla here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am so glad you could join me here today as I am excited to tell you about my upcoming series about distressings. Since this is an introduction to distressings, let me tell you just a few words about them. First of all, they are fade resistant, so the colors on your project will remain vibrant. They are also water-based dye inks, which means they react beautifully with water. So this product was the first ink I have ever bought, and since the moment I bought it, it has been my favorite. I found out about distressings for the first time when watching one of the videos on YouTube, so I was that fascinated there and I fell in love with these vibrant colors and the ink properties. I decided to buy two of them to try them out, and since it was a fall period, I went with Barn Door and Mustard Seed, two colors that blend well together as they are from the same color family. And even though I bought them about 2 years ago, they are still working just fine and they are still juicy. So as you can see, distressings come in two sizes. The big size is 3 inches in diameter, and this felt filled with ink is 2¼ inches. And the mini distress inks, which I store in this Tim Holtz tin box, are 1¼ inch pad, and inside the felt ink area is 1 inch. So it's more or less 1/4 of the big ink pad. So like I said, I store the mini ink pads in this tin can. I store my big ink pads on top of each other just like that, and I use this tape, like a white tape, to name them. It's a very simple way of writing the name, but when I store them this way, I can always see the name of my ink pad instead of just always looking at them from the top. So I also have the sponges for blending for these ink pads. I store them in a little bowl on the side. For the mini distressings, I store them underneath. I store them with the color towards the ink pad. That way I know for sure when I pick it up that it's the right color. And I think these tin cans are really cool for storing the ink pads, although I've heard that some people suggest storing them upside down, and that way the ink always goes to the top of your felt. So when you're picking up the ink with your ink blender, the blending tool rather, you always get the most of the ink on top. So these are the ink blending tools. One of the first ones, the first one that came out was rectangular, so it was bigger and it had kind of sharp edges. So when you were blending the ink, you could on your project have those sharp edges. So later on, Tim Holtz came up with these round mini blending tools, which have round edges, and it gives a much nicer impression when you're blending the ink onto your project. So basically what you do is, in my case, I just pick up my mini ink pad, I press it, and there it is, and I can just keep applying my ink onto my project. So for all the ink pads, you have the reinkers, and this is how they look like. They come with a little eyedrop applicator, and you can apply your ink onto the ink pad and then close it. The top is always higher than the felt, so even when you add your ink and you close it, it will not touch the top from within. So from what I've heard and what I do, I usually add the ink when I re-ink them, although I did not re-ink any of my big ink pads just yet, but I had to re-ink my little ones. I must tell you, some of those I bought in October last year, and I had to re-ink them again April this year. So in my experience, the big ink pads last much longer, obviously because of the size, but I also found out that the mini ink pads, even after re-inking, are not as juicy as they were when you buy them. So maybe it's just my experience. I just find the big ink pads are a better deal for your money. Unless of course you know that you will not be using some color that much, then a mini ink pad is a great idea. So to finish off this lengthy introduction, I just would like to show you a few cards I made using distress inks and introduce you to some techniques used on them. So this is a card I made last year using lawn fawn stitched leaves. I blended the ink on top of each of the leaves, and then I used glossy accents on top. But you can see how beautifully the inks blend on those die cuts. This is the using distress inks as watercolor. You can see a video for this card on my channel. I link it down in the description below, so you can see how beautifully you can create the gradient effect using the distress ink. This is using distress inks over stencil, and actually in this case, when you have more intricate stencil, you can use the sponge daubers. This is by Tsukienko. This is how I read it. I'm not sure this is how it is actually pronounced. And these are these little sponge daubers that you put on your finger, and that way you can apply your ink in the more intricate areas. This is also using a stencil and blending the inks. You can see how beautifully they blend within each other. Here I actually used I think the yellow blended with blue, creating the green, and the orange is red blended with yellow. So you don't have to buy all the colors, just the main basic ones, and then you can create different shades and different colors. This is the card made using just a blending technique with some droplets of water. You can see you can create scenes using distress ink. You can do blending, gradient effect just like before. This is using smooshing technique, which I really love. You basically use some water and you smoosh the ink. You can see a video for this card as well on my channel, and I'll be making a new one just to refresh the technique. And this is using embossing folder, so you can see this area is raised, and applying some distress inks over the top. So these are just a few of the techniques you can do using distress inks, and that was all for this time. I hope you enjoyed me talking about distress inks and found it somewhat interesting. And if you did, I hope you will subscribe to my channel to see the upcoming many distress ink techniques videos. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day!